Very well. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hello, everyone. Welcome to this fourth match in round two of the International Reparations Debate Competition 2025. Delighted that you could have joined us. We have two teams geared up to engage in a riveting contest and an exciting motion. Before we do so, let us get to meet our panel, the panel in whose hands the outcome of this match rests. I'm Jermaine Barrett, and I'll be the chair adjudicator for this match. And I'll now invite my colleague adjudicators to introduce themselves, beginning with Saniq Martin.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Sunny Martin, one of your wing adjudicators for this match. I look forward to a very engaging match from both sides to discuss our exciting motion.
Indeed, exciting is one way to describe what is going to be shaping up in this match. Joshua, how about you? Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joshua Atkins. I'll be serving as a wing adjudicator for today. I look forward to an exciting clash of ideas because I know the teams have prepared well for this second round.
Thank you very much, Joshua. And Joshua just mentioned the word teams. Yes, we have two teams geared up to spar, to engage in this intellectual battle. The teams are St. Joseph Convent, Port of Spain, out of Trinidad and Tobago, and they're going up, and their proposition, and they're going up against the opposition team, Barrackpore West Secondary School, also out of Trinidad and Tobago. So two Trini teams, yes, contesting a very exciting motion. But before we reveal the motion, we have some very valuable partners and sponsors that we're so grateful have decided to join this important thrust. And so, Sonique, would you be so kind as to tell our audience who our sponsors and partners are?
Absolutely. So our sponsors are the University of the West Indies, the Center for Reparation Research, CARICOM's Reparations Commission, the Jamaica Association for Debate and Empowerment, the Repair Campaign, the PJ Patterson Institute for Africa Caribbean Public Advocacy, and the University of Hull.
Indeed, and indeed, we are so grateful for our partners and our sponsors. Now, ladies and gentlemen, our motion is about to be announced. So again, I turn over to you, Saniq, again to tell everyone here what will these two teams be debating about? What is our motion?
Okay, our very scintillating motion is this House prefers debt cancellation over monetary compensation as a means of reparations.
All right, exciting debt cancellation over monetary compensation for reparations. All right, so we are now ready. And at this time, I welcome the Prime Minister coming to you from St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain, to open the debate, speaking for 7 minutes. Of course, Sonique Martin will be our timekeeper as well, so she will indicate the important stages of the speech in terms of the time via the chat. Prime Minister, over to you.
Over 75% of all low and lower middle income countries spend more on debt servicing than they do on healthcare. Indeed, 55% of these countries spend on debt serving is now more than double that of the spending on health. This is from the report from Action Aid, a reparations organization from South Africa, which takes its information directly from the World Bank. It is clear that external debt related to colonialism and the unjust systems colonialism created is a serious and crippling problem facing nations in the Caribbean, Africa, and Latin America, and it keeps these nations down. Debt cancellation is something that we deserve, something that we are owed, and should be the first form of reparations that we are considering. The issue of these collapsing economies cannot even begin to be corrected by monetary compensation. We advocate firmly for the implementation of debt cancellation and debt reversal, as well as a systemic reform of international financial institutions, which have historically imposed conditions that prioritize economic exploitation over development and social welfare. Before we continue, I would like to lay out some definitions. Monetary compensation refers to the financial payments made to individuals, communities, or countries to compensate for historical injustices. Debt cancellation involves the reduction or complete forgiveness of outstanding external debt owed by a country, often facilitated through international agreements. Debt servicing is a repayment of loans taken out by a country. Reparations refers to the broad long-term efforts to compensate countries and communities for historical injustices they have suffered, particularly in the context of slavery and colonialism. Ultimately, they're about best supporting and mending the damage caused by colonialism, helping these victims. Why are these nations in so much debt in the first place? For the majority of former colonies, European exploitation severely damaged their economies. During the colonial era, Europe structured economies in Africa and the Caribbean that primarily served their own interests. Colonized nations were left with minimal infrastructure, such as undeveloped transportation systems, insufficient healthcare, and poor educational facilities, all of which hindered their ability to develop a sustainable and stable economy after independence. After independence, they obviously want to rebuild their countries. However, they are finding that their resources have been extracted. They have monocrop economies, meaning they have to rely on only one export to give them funds. So they must take out loans from international financial institutions, such as the World Bank through the IMF. However, these loans came with extremely high interest rates and strict conditions. The IMF and the World Bank typically required borrowing countries to implement austerity measures or structural adjustment programs, which meant cutting government spending on social services like education and healthcare, reducing public sector wages, and privatizing national industries, meaning that resources which were located in the country that rightfully belonged to them were being taken over by Europeans. This increased the economic instability within those countries. This occurred in countries such as Ghana, Zambia, Mozambique, and Haiti. Haiti is a prime example of how colonial debt has hindered the development of former colonies. After they gained independence in 1804, Haiti was forced to pay an indemnity of 150 million francs, which was later reduced to 90 million, as punishment for their freedom. This loan they were left to repay over hundreds of years. And even though it says that they repaid those loans in 1947, they are actually still paying them off to Citibank, which is a bank owned by the United States. This demonstrates clearly how colonial nations and international financial institutions create a system where former colonies are financially burdened by debts which were inherently unjust. This also occurred in Angola in 1975 and the Democratic Republic of
Good
Congo
afternoon, everyone.
in
Camille
1960.
Perriman of 2N. Please meet your guardian and by the guard, please. Please meet your guardian by the guard. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about the interruption. We must ask ourselves what will aid these victims of colonialism and its unfair systems more? A financial band-aid to soothe Europe's guilt, provided that they have any at all, a sum that cannot even be guaranteed to be used efficiently and that does not even address structural disadvantages and setbacks, or liberation from the chains of perpetual debt that keep these nations trapped in cycles. How does this debt cycle work? This is a vicious, self-perpetuating loop that often starts with initial loans taken out for purposes of economic reconstruction, but the unfair high interest rates, which are, according to the World Bank and a report taken from the World Bank, for African nations, the interest rates are 9.8%. Meanwhile, for European nations like Germany or Austria or Switzerland, it's 0.8%, reflecting how unfair these loans are. In other words, the loans they take out to build infrastructure, improve public services, or fund development end up going straight towards repaying the debt, preventing meaningful development from even occurring. Debt servicing exacerbates structural inequality. The very systems of exploitation that were set up by colonial powers are still present today, just in a different form. Debt as it stands was often imposed by institutions like the IMF and World Bank, which take advantage of these countries' vulnerabilities post-independence, leaving them with little choice but to accept loans to rebuild. According to Gordon Moyo's report in 2024, the World Bank, the IMF, and World Trade Organization as agents of financial imperialism, this trio champions neoliberal programs such as privatization of the public sector, trade liberalization, and deregulation, all of which have paved the way for multinational corporations, capitalist class, and African collaborators to export financial capital to offshore financial centers and tax havens across the globe. Moral reparation for national independence does not fool us, and it does not feed us. The wealth of imperialist nations is also our wealth. Frantz Fanon, a Martinican psychiatrist and psychologist and philosopher. Monetary compensation will never be enough to create sustainable long-term wealth until the economic structures that enforce dependency, exploitative lending, and financial inequality are dismantled and reformed to ensure true economic sovereignty from former colonies. True justice is not found in payouts, but in systemic change that removes these exploitative economic structures. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Prime Minister, coming to you there from St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain. At this time, we turn to the opposition side to hear from the opposition leader.
Yes, esteemed colleagues and fellow advocates for justice, we in the opposition strongly refute the motion that this House prefers debt cancellation over monetary compensation as a means of reparations. Dr. Eric Williams said it best in his book, Capitalism and Slavery. Wealth was extracted from the Caribbean for centuries. True reparations should mean the return of that wealth in ways that uplift the people, not simply erasing debts that was never ours to begin with. The IRS defines debt cancellation as the act of the creditor forgiving or eliminating a borrower's obligation to repay a debt, either partially or entirely. This effectively releases the borrower from the legal requirement to fulfill the debt. While Portuguese public finance defines monetary compensation as the provision of funds as a form of repayment for losses, damages, services, or other valid claims. In the words of reparations activist and Belgian ambassador to CARICOM, David Commissionen, reparation must be forward-looking. Direct financial compensation allows Caribbean nations to build industries, fund infrastructure, and foster entrepreneurship. A simple cancellation of debt leaves us empty-handed with no resources to advance. Debt cancellation does not address the root cause of economic injustice. Debt cancellation may provide short-term relief, but it fails to address the systemic economic inequalities that have long persisted in the Caribbean as a result of colonialism and slavery and exploitation. The Caribbean economies are still disproportionately impacted by the historical injustices of the colonial era, which left them with underdeveloped economies, dependent on external powers and persistent social inequalities. As Dr. Hilary Beckles, Vice Chancellor of the University of West Indies and prominent advocate for reparations, argues reparation must be about social justice, not economic convenience. Debt cancellation, while beneficial in alleviating current fiscal burdens, does not fundamentally change the economic systems that perpetuate poverty, inequality, and underdevelopment in the Caribbean. Monetary compensation, on the other hand, would provide the necessary resources to address historical inequalities directly by investing in education, infrastructure, healthcare, and other essential areas that can foster long-term social and economic development. Debt cancellation does not promote genuine economic independence. The Caribbean economic challenges are compounded by its reliance on foreign debt, much of which is owed to the former colonial powers or institutions with historical ties to the exploitation of that region. While debt cancellation may reduce some of the external burden, it does not promote true economic independence. The Caribbean nation continues to be integrated into a global capitalist system that in many ways mirrors the economic relationships forged during the colonial eras. As Dr. Vern Shepherd, a Jamaican historian and advocate for reparation, notes, reparation are not just about forgiving loans, but reparative justice that empowers nations to break free from chains of the global economic system and continue to marginalize them. Monetary compensation would allow Caribbean nations to reinvest in their own sovereignty and self-determination, helping to dismantle the ongoing global structures of inequality. While debt cancellation may be seen as a financial reprieve, it can also have unintended consequences. One major concern is that it could lead to a reduction in international credibility or make it harder for Caribbean nations to secure future loans at a favorable rate. As an economic system based on credit and debit works, there is only a risk that debt cancellation could impact the future borrowing ability of the Caribbean states. Furthermore, debt cancellation does not ensure the funds will be used effectively or invested in the right areas to repair the legacy of colonialism. Without an accompanying structure of accountability and guidance, debt relief might be squandered on short-term or politically motivated parties rather than sustainable development projects that target the heart of the region's problem. Unlike debt cancellation, monetary compensation is more direct means of empowering the Caribbean population. Reparation through financial compensation would allow Caribbean nations to invest in education, healthcare, public infrastructure, and social welfare systems that provide long-term benefits to the descendants of enslaved people. As Sir Hilary Beckles contends, the compensation must be transformative and it must aim at equity. Only through monetary compensation can the government have the resources they need to address systemic inequalities and promote an equitable future. Monetary compensation has been successfully used in other contexts to redress historical injustices. For example, the United States provided compensation to Japanese American interned during World War II, recognizing the necessities of a direct financial redress for the suffering and loss they experienced.
Points of information.
I do not accept. Similarly, the German government has compensated Holocaust survivors and their families, acknowledging the profound economic, psychological, and social damage caused by the atrocities. And these Caribbean financial compensation not only acknowledge the wrongdoing, but also provide a tangible means for victims to rebuild their lives. This precedent supports the argument that monetary compensation is more comprehensive and effective form of reparation than debt cancellation, as it offers direct resources needed to uplift communities and rectify disparities. If you erase a country's debt, you're not giving it wealth, you're just resetting it to zero. But guess what? Zero does not mean progress. It means Caribbean nations are still left struggling with low GDP, weak industries, underfunded schools, and healthcare systems that barely
All right,
support
thank
people.
you, Speaker.
Thank you very much. That indicates that you are out of time. Thank you very much for that speech, Leader of the Opposition. At this time, we go to our first segment of cross-examination, beginning with the questions from the opposition team, that's Barrackpore Secondary School. And those questions will be posed to St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain.
In the opening segment, the speaker mentioned that they had to pay for the freedom. I disagree that they should pay for the freedom. Don't you think monetary compensation would be the best form of reparation?
Can you clarify on that question?
All right, I'll react. Why should they pay for the freedom? Don't you think that monetary compensation would be the best form of reparation for the enslaved people and their descendants?
No, I don't agree. I think that debt cancellation is what can free them from the modern day chains of colonialism that they are still suffering under through structural adjustment programs, through terms of the loans, through simply repaying these loans, many of which loans are considered to be bad debts by the countries which they're owed to. Therefore, if these loans were to be cancelled, it would not harm the creditors in any real way. I don't know what you're talking about with, okay, yeah. Thank you.
How does debt cancellation address the loss of generational wealth caused by colonialism, slavery, and exploitation?
This generational, that question can simply be answered by considering how was this generational wealth lost? Debt cancellation is the necessary first step. You cannot simply repay these loans because they will immediately be swallowed up by the debts that they are still repaying today.
If reparations are meant to provide redress, why not combine debt cancellation and monetary compensation for a more comprehensive solution?
Ultimately, reparations, the goal of reparations is to ensure that these victims of colonialism and all of its damage are in a better position than they were left in. They are uplifted, they are supported, they are mended. The broken systems within those countries are solved. That is the goal of reparations. And through debt cancellation, those systems can be broken. Those systems of colonialism which exist today can be broken. They can be liberated from the chains of debt. And monetary compensation while it does have some benefits, it simply cannot address the amount of this debt.
All right, thank you very much for those three questions, Barrackpore West Secondary School. We now go to hearing the three questions from St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain.
Okay. Can you clarify what this root cause of economic instability within the Caribbean and Africa and Latin America was that you brought up previously in your argument?
Symbolism is important, but tangible economic empowerment is more valuable. If Fresh Start does not ensure long-term economic stability, nor does it prevent countries from falling back into debt due to structural issues. Compensation provides long-term financial support and can be tied to economic reforms that promote sustainable development.
I didn't hear anything you just said. Sorry. Could you clarify on the question which I asked, which is root cause? Sorry, you broke up.
Okay, could you just repeat because I am lost on what you're asking?
The question that I asked was, what is this root cause of economic instability within the Caribbean and Africa and Latin America that you brought up previously? Like, what is causing this?
The economic root cause would be the debt they cause. I'm sorry, I can't answer the question because I don't fully understand. Can we move on to the next question?
St. Joseph's Convent, you may ask your second question.
Okay. Can you ensure that monetary compensation funds, as you mentioned, accountability is necessary? How would these monetary compensation funds be able to be kept accountable?
Debt cancellation is not free. Creditors often private bank, international financial institution. Sometimes other governments will pay a financial burden. This could lead to stricter lending practices, increased interest rates, and reluctancy to finance future projects in developing countries. In contrast, monetary compensation can be managed through structured payments, ensuring funds are raised and allocated in ways that does not destabilize the financial sector. Thank you.
St. Joseph's, your third question?
Okay. Can I have an example of where reparations have been paid in monetary compensation since the end of colonialism, relating specifically to the ex-colonies of United Kingdom, France, Spain?
I don't have those examples right now, but aren't we trying to promote monetary compensation instead of debt cancellation, as monetary compensation would provide the victims with more materials and redress to build their own economies and schools?
But
Okay. Thank you very much to both schools for an interesting set of questions and an equally interesting set of responses. All right, so we continue our debate. At this time, we welcome the Deputy Prime Minister from St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain, to present their case within 6 minutes. Hear, hear. St. Joseph?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Compounding on what my esteemed Prime Minister, compounding on the remarks made by my esteemed Prime Minister, I would like to continue on why debt cancellation is the most feasible option today. We live in a world where the rich continue to profit off the blood, sweat, and tears of the poor. One where billionaires spend millions annually on recreation alone, but act as if a single charitable donation would cripple them. Most of these 1%ers see the lower classes as nothing more than a workforce and a market to pander to selectively for profit. And while most of these 1%ers do not come from old money, they certainly have no qualms of adopting the hateful bigotry that continues to keep them in the upper echelons of society. Therefore, when looking at the true dark nature of these people, why would you ever think that they would willingly give back money to the same people the capitalist system that keeps them in power thrives on squashing down? It's delusional to think that any of these people would hand up their hard-earned cash to those they see as lesser than. And this delusion is even more ridiculous when you realize that most of today's financial elites are not even directly descended from colonial powers, making them all the more reluctant to assist in this campaign. All this to say that it is an unrealistic goal to expect altruism from a group that has shown time and time again their reluctance toward basic human decency. Instead of focusing resources on what is unfortunately a fantastical pipe dream in today's social climate, resources should instead be channeled towards solutions that countries will actually be open to. In October 2024, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, explicitly stated that the UK would never pay cash reparations, but would be open to debt cancellation. The UK, that we can all agree may be the country with the most penance to pay after being the leading colonial power for centuries. If the country with undeniably the most to pay for explicitly states time and time again, because this is not a new stance that Mr. Starmer proposed, that they would not be open to monetary compensation, how could we ever convince the other former colonial powers? The UK's denial sets a precedent that certainly could not be swayed with military action or embargoes. Not only would countries such as those in the Caribbean never be able to compete with their leading militaries and monopoly on the global economy, it would begin a financial crisis, ultimately hurting our countries more than those we seek justice from. Furthermore, debt forgiveness is currently the more bureaucratically feasible solution. As stated by my colleague before me, many of the countries indebted to international organizations and foreign countries today are those at a historical disadvantage, and you yourself stated so. Allowing these countries to be relieved of these debts is giving them an opportunity to flourish. You quoted the great esteemed Dr. Eric Williams, who said that we need to uplift the people. What is more uplifting than freeing them from past anchors, past ties to these colonial powers, and then allowing them to be monetarily compensated? Finally, after centuries of being weighed down by physical and economic colonial forces, these countries can start anew. They can focus on developing themselves internally without the anchor of billions of dollars of foreign debt weighing them down, therefore allowing for true upliftment. This ensures that the benefits of this solution are felt throughout the country and reduces risk of corruption and exploitation by selfish leaders. You spoke about accountability. The best way to ensure that accountability is met is by avoiding any instance of corruption, avoiding any instance of undermining this honest goal. So many countries today are plagued with corrupt officials mishandling national funds, many of which are the very same countries that would be given monetary compensation as a form of reparations. To hand these politicians millions of dollars and expect them not to continue as they already are is to leave a wolf alone in the henhouse. It spits in the face of accountability, actually. It would only be a bloodbath. Citizens would only be given false hope only to see it once again ripped away by those in power. Debt cancellation protects citizens from the loans taken out by corrupt dictatorships, ensuring that they don't continue to pay the price for the actions undertaken by people who, in the vast majority of cases, were put in place by European or American powers for their own selfish goals. These debts are defined by international law as odious. They're illegitimate debts to be personally repaid by the government that incurred them, and thus not the responsibility of the people. Additionally, you spoke about how debt cancellation would be a quick fix, and I counter that argument by simply stating that if you give these people, these countries which are already still trying to pay off debt, monetary compensation, where would this money go? Would it not immediately be swallowed up by the debts they are trying to repay? Debt cancellation is the most feasible first step to the long but necessary path of reparations. You spoke about finding a compromise, and we agree. A compromise should be met. However, this is a step-by-step process. Righting centuries of wrongs cannot be done within 2 months or 3. Debt cancellation, however, is the first step to this long process. Not only is it the only solution likely, as proven by Mr. Starmer, to be accepted by most governments, it is also the only way to allow citizens to heal without being undermined by corrupt officials. By forgiving the already unjust debts of the past, countries can look toward a brighter future, unburdened by the injustices their ancestors had to face. Thank you.
Thank you very much to that speaker, that the second speaker from Team St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain. At this time, I call upon the Deputy Leader of the Opposition from Barrackpore Secondary School to present their arguments on behalf of the opposition side.
All protocols observed. Firstly, we, the opposition, would like to congratulate the government for agreeing with us that monetary compensation is required and not debt cancellation. We, the opposition, argue that debt cancellation offers short-term relief, but monetary compensation provides economic empowerment for Caribbean nations. It fosters development, addresses historical injustices, and ensures long-term financial independence. Many Caribbean countries are no longer indebted to the colonial predecessors, making debt cancellation less effective as a reparative tool. According to the World Bank, while the Caribbean is still heavily dependent on foreign borrowing, most of this debt is owed to international financial institutions, multilateral organizations, or private creditors, not former colonial powers. The IMF data from 2020 shows that only a small portion of debt in the Caribbean countries is owed to former colonizers. For example, Barbados, which is historically indebted to the United Kingdom, has since restructured its debt and shifted its focus towards global markets and multilateral financial institutions. In 2020, the IMF reported that Barbados' foreign debt was predominantly owed to international creditors rather than the UK. Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago, two of the largest Caribbean economies, also own most of this debt to multilateral financial organizations like the IMF and the CDB, not to their former colonial powers. As of 2021, Jamaica's public debt was estimated at around 130% of GDP, with multilateral institutions holding a significant proportion of this debt. Similarly, Trinidad and Tobago has restructured its debt, and much of it is owed to international creditors rather than the UK. Thus, debt cancellation from colonial powers is no longer a practical or feasible solution for many Caribbean nations. The economic realities today show that these nations have diverse their borrowing and that their debts are largely exiled and modern in origin, unrelated to the colonial past. Monetary compensation offers the direct financial resources that Caribbean countries can use to invest in critical infrastructure, education, healthcare, and social programs. For example, education and human capital. No, I do not accept. Caribbean governments could benefit from monetary compensation to improve underfunded education system during colonial rule. This will empower future generations and equip them with economic success tools. Increased investment in education is linked to higher productivity, innovation, and economic growth, as argued by Caribbean historian Dr. Vereen Shepard. Infrastructure and economic diversification. Caribbean countries heavily reliant on tourism and agriculture could diversify their economies by investing in infrastructure like transport and renewable energy. Monetary compensation could create jobs and stimulate economic growth, as noted by the World Bank for long-term sustainable development. The COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated the weaknesses in public health system across the Caribbean. By allocating monetary compensation towards healthcare, infrastructure, and public health systems, these countries are better equipped to address both current and future health crises. The success of monetary compensation as a means of redress can be seen in other contexts, where financial reparations have been provided in historical injustice. For instance, in the United States, the Japanese American internment survivors received $20,000 each as a part of the Civil Liberties Act of 1998, which had only provided financial support to those affected, but also empowered them to rebuild their lives and invest in their future. As Eric Yamoto 2013 pointed out, that reparations provided a foundation for Japanese American communities to overcome the financial and emotional scares of internment, contributing to the economic success. If Jamaica's debt is wiped out today, that doesn't mean Jamaica suddenly has the funds to build new roads, invest in technology, or improve in education. It just means it no longer owns money, but it still has to find ways to generate wealth. If Barbados receives millions in direct reparations, the government can fund scholarships, invest in small businesses, and build sustainable energy sources that has lasting impact. Debt relief is just a band-aid. It prevents nations from drowning, but doesn't help them swim. Monetary reparations offers a real chance for Caribbean nations to build economies that work for them rather than consistently being at the mercy of global financial institutions. Debt cancellation is like freeing a prisoner, but leaving them with nothing. No home, no food, no means to rebuild their lives. Monetary compensation is like giving them the tools, wealth, and power to build an empire. For centuries, the Caribbean was stripped of its wealth, its people forced into labor that built the fortunes of empires by leaving their own nation impoverished. Now, after a generation of economic oppression, debt cancellation simply erases the number on a balance sheet, but that does nothing in return what was stolen. It's like saying we won't punish you for being poor, but we won't help you either. That's not reparation. That is charity disguised as justice. Monetary compensation, however, is a true transfer of power. It means Caribbean nations don't just survive, they strive. It allows them to own their industries, educate their people, invest in technology, and build economies that no longer rely on the very powers that once saved people them. If reparations are about repair, then nothing short of returning stolen wealth can never be enough. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Leader of the Opposition. We now enter our second segment of cross-examination. We invite at this time the proposition team, that's St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain, to ask their questions to sorry, right, to yeah, Barrackpore West. Sorry, the other way around, my apologies. So Barrackpore West, you get to ask questions of St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain.
Thank you very much. In the beginning of your argument, you mentioned they should not pay back to the people they capture them. Are you agreeing with us?
Can you repeat your question or clarify your question?
In the beginning of your argument, you mentioned they should not pay back to the people that capture them. Are you agreeing with us?
We're not agreeing with you, agreeing that they should not be repaying money to the people that capture them. In fact, directly links to the fact that they should actually be forgiven for the debts that they were made to repay to the people that capture them.
But I'm still agreeing, but thank you. Number two, why should they pay in the first place? Shouldn't they be compensated for their suffering?
Yes, they should be compensated for their suffering, but the compensation is worthless if it's immediately being swallowed up by unforgiven debts from centuries ago.
But won't you agree monetary compensation is better than debt cancellation? Because monetary compensation will be able to build up a country. Like when we gained independence from Trinidad and Tobago, independence from the British colony, we were able to strive for monetary compensation, but other countries cannot. So debt cancellation is not required. Won't you agree?
Once again, it's not an either or scenario. Monetary compensation is fruitless without the forgiving of debts. Debt cancellation is actually crucial first step, and it's the first thing that should be done in any of these scenarios.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barrackpore West Secondary School, for those questions, and thanks as well to the proposition team, St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain, for those responses. St. Joseph's Convent, it is now your turn to ask questions of Barrackpore.
You spoke about the fact that today most Caribbean countries aren't actually indebted to the colonial powers. However, I'd like to ask you, right? You said that they're indebted to international banks. Where are these international banks located and who are they owned by?
They're located in Europe, owned by the wealthy people. But that has nothing to do with what we were talking about. Today we're talking about Caribbean monetary compensation and debt cancellation. So let's stick to that, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
What percentage of the government of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is controlled by members of Africa, the Caribbean, or Latin America?
I'm sorry, I don't have the figure that figure at this point in time.
Thank you. We can.
St. Joseph, you may now ask your third question.
Go ahead.
There's no more questions. Oh, okay. Don't you agree that it is absolutely redundant to not prioritize debt cancellation over monetary compensations? You talk about how it could be beneficial, but it cannot be beneficial unless you prioritize debt cancellation, which is what our debate, the debate that we're having right now, is about. So wouldn't you agree that debt cancellation is more necessary, firstly?
Why should they be paying debt in the first place? If they were captured, why should they be paying for the freedom? They should not be paying for the freedom. Instead, they should be compensated for what was caused to them. Imagine being enslaved. You should be compensated. Why would you want to go and have to find money to pay for your freedom? You should be compensated with materials to redress and build your economy.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much to both teams for the questions and answers. Again, another exciting and dare I say mind-expanding segment of cross-examination. At this time, we're going to pause for 1 minute to allow you to refresh yourselves and get ready for the conclusion of our debate. That conclusion will be by way of the reply speeches. So your 1 minute begins now. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the concluding segment of our debate. We're now going to hear the final speeches from both teams, beginning with that from the opposition team. Let's make welcome the reply speaker from Barrackpore West Secondary School out of Trinidad.
Hi, can you please repeat what you said?
Yes, just inviting your reply speaker to present their 5 minute speech. Barrackpore.
Honorable Chair, esteemed judges, and respected members of the House, we stand in firm opposition to the motion. This House prefers a debt cancellation to monetary compensation as a means for reparations. While debt cancellation may sound appealing as a quick solution to economic challenges faced by the Caribbean, it does not provide a lasting, substantive resolution to the historical injustices suffered during the colonial era. In contrast, monetary compensation offers a far more powerful tool to address the systemic underdevelopment caused by centuries of exploitation and to ensure long-term sustainable economic growth for Caribbean nations. Debt cancellation fails to address root causes of economic injustice. The core issue reparations aims to address in the legacy of colonialism and slavery. While debt cancellation reduces a country's fiscal burdens in the short term, it does nothing to repair deep-rooted structural inequalities. Take Jamaica as an example. Despite its heavy debt load, much of its challenges stem from its historical reliance on a monocrop economy, primarily sugar, and its lack of diversified industries. Debt cancellation alone would not help Jamaica create the resilient economy needed to thrive in a globalized world. Monetary compensation, on the other hand, would provide the resources necessary to invest in infrastructure, education, and healthcare, areas where the scars of colonialism are still painfully evident. Caribbean nations are not heavily indebted to colonial powers. Another key point the opposition overlooks is that most Caribbean nations are no longer indebted to their colonial predecessors. While many face significant debt, this is largely owed to modern financial institutions such as the IMF, the World Bank, and private creditors, not former colonial powers. This makes the proposition's focus on debt cancellation from colonial powers largely irrelevant. As Dr. Kirk Mighu, a political economist, states, the Caribbean's contemporary economic challenges cannot be addressed by debt cancellation from former colonial powers. The region needs direct investment to correct the historical wrongs and build institutions that provide long-term economic stability. Monetary compensation provides resources that transformational change. Unlike debt cancellation, monetary compensation provides direct financial resources to invest in the future. It allows governments to address both immediate and long-term needs. For example, South Africa's reparations program for apartheid victims, which included financial compensation and community development programs, has had a transformative effect. Similarly, German reparations to Holocaust survivors helped individuals rebuild their lives, invest in businesses, and contribute to their economies. Caribbean nations could use monetary compensation to rebuild their educational systems, address disparities in health, and stimulate innovation. The moral imperative of monetary compensation. Reparations are about more than just economics. They are about justice. The transatlantic slave trade and colonialism robbed Caribbean nations of not just their wealth, but also their dignity. Professor Sir Hilary Beckles emphasizes this, stating, reparations are a matter of justice. Debt relief may provide some economic respite, but it does not restore justice for those who have been wronged. Only direct monetary compensation can begin to restore what was stolen and help to rebuild nations damaged by centuries of exploitation. Debt cancellation is an insufficient and outdated solution. Monetary compensation, however, provides the resources needed to correct structural inequalities and empower communities the transform economies. The Caribbean deserves reparations that allows it to heal, rebuild, and flourish, not just temporary debt relief. As we have shown through examples from South Africa, Germany, and Canada, monetary compensation has the potential to create lasting positive change in a way that debt cancellation simply cannot. Nobel Prize-winning economist Professor Sir William Alter Lewis sums it up best. Development.
Thank you very much, third speaker, the reply speaker from Barrackpore West Secondary School. This time, to conclude our debate, let us make welcome the third speaker from the proposition team, St. Joseph's Convent, Portersfield. Let's make that speaker welcome. The proposition reply.
Sorry. As the government member, I would like to address a few blatant inaccuracies the opposition made and to reinforce the arguments that this House presented previously to prove that our preference of debt cancellation is exceedingly more logical and feasible. You said previously that why should they have to pay off debts in the first place? They never had a debt to begin with. Therefore, the debt should be cancelled. To recap, debt cancellation allows nations to untether themselves from the inequitable mass debt that's hindering their development, debt that's triggered by the prejudiced colonialism system. Why should countries who are currently reaping the negative impacts of colonialism be forced to compensate those who wronged them? Don't you owe it to those countries to clear the debts that you instituted? The system is riddled with blatant errors that debt cancellation can rectify. It is apparent that the opposition believes that affected countries should continue to bear the weight of insolvency while their oppressors bask in their unjustifiable compensation. As we also stated, many nations have explicitly said that they are not willing to provide monetary reparations. This begs the question, where is this imaginary money that the opposition claims to exist? Additionally, the process of monetary compensation is fruitless without the prioritization of debt cancellation. A vicious cycle is created as countries receive monetary reparations, yet essentially lose any compensation they gained, leaving them financially stagnant. To further this point,
Countries like Jamaica, as you mentioned, their debt service is a significant portion of their gross national income. So showing how much of a toll monetary compensation cannot even fix. It is nonsensical to pursue this utopia that monetary reparations will solve all predicaments, as without debt cancellation, it only furthers this cycle. Apparently, it is not in the opposition's interest to advance the development of countries, but to allow this failing system to persist with quick fixes like monetary reparations instead the immediate relief of burdens from debt cancellation. Monetary reparations is only a plaster on a gunshot wound that does not rectify the issue. Debt cancellation allows for administrative simplicity as a straightforward transaction, while monetary reparations require superfluous and complex processes like determining amounts owed. To add, 55 countries in Africa have 6.1 voting rights in IMF. Latin America 6.4 in IMF as well, illustrating how, as we also stated, that along with debt cancellation, we advocate for systemic reform of international financial institutions like the World Bank, which have historically imposed conditions that prioritize economic exploitation over development and social welfare. These poorly structured systems are prohibiting the major success that debt cancellation could have, and that needs to change. These reasons highlighted show how dishearteningly oblivious the opposition is to the senselessness of monetary reparations and validate this House's preference to the competent system of debt cancellation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that proposition reply speech. And thanks to all our debaters in what is a very exciting contest. Unfortunately, it just ended. Ladies and gentlemen, viewers, we as the adjudicators will now pause to deliberate, and we will hopefully be back soon with the results. Stay tuned.
We are St. Joseph's Convent, Florida, Spain. When you look at us 5 girls, what do you see? All coming from different ways of life and backgrounds. However, we are all converged here in this moment, not by chance, but from a series of intricate and purposeful decisions. Decisions made by people much more powerful than you will ever be, driven by greed, glory, God, and the hunt for gold. This is why reparations are so important, to right the wrongs of the past. Thank you.
The Caribbean region's desire for reparations for colonialism stems from the profound economic, social, and cultural injustices inflicted during centuries of exploitation.
We are Form 6 students and debate champions at Barrackpore Secondary School in Trinidad and Tobago. My name is Caitlin Mohammed,
Roland Armstrong,
Kevin Armstrong, Charlotte Namdan. Proponents assert that financial compensation and restorative justice are critical for repairing these historical wrongs and empowering future generations.
Opponents question the fairness of assigning responsibility to contemporary societies for the actions of their ancestors.
Now, that's why Barrackpore West Secondary School need to be at this debate competition.
The Center for Reparation Research is thrilled to launch this International Reparation Debate Competition. This International Reparation Debate Competition that we launched today for secondary schools is one of our most important projects. How do we engage youth on matters of reparatory justice? The change needed in the education system can only be advanced when the youth are engaged and their voices are heard.
Why is reparations so important in and for the Caribbean? Because time comes for justice for our ancestors. Time comes for the Caribbean to insist on the right to development, to be compensated for the violence against our ancestors. So outreach to the young people who have joined this movement is critical.
And this initiative is phenomenal. And you know why? Because it's engaging with young people. And it's young people that I believe, are going to be the future of the reparatory justice movement. The greatest weapon that there is in this whole fight for reparatory justice is the young people of today. I hope this debate spurs a whole new generation of advocates for reparatory justice, and the UK and the EU have got to make amends for the ills of the transatlantic slavery. This is going to be a phenomenal competition.
There is no mass movement that isn't a youth movement.
And we certainly want reparations to be a mass movement. So it's really exciting, though, to have a regional stroke international debating competition. And I'm looking forward to your participation as you construct your arguments for and against, remembering that the 10-point plan for reparatory justice is our guiding framework for the areas in which we are demanding compensation, because we certainly want to impact the public opinion and awareness in Europe. So it's fantastic to have the United Kingdom participating as well.
So why is it important for youth to be involved in the reparation movement? Being involved in the reparations movement is critical to youth if one is to know their history so that they can understand why their societies are functioning as they are today. The future of the countries we live in are dependent on the current situation that exists today in our countries. And these current conditions were created by the past, including indigenous genocide, African enslavement, indentureship, and colonization. Being involved in reparations is about seeking justice, seeking a way to reduce inequalities in our own countries and then in the broader world. It's about seeking a more peaceful and balanced world, where global problems are solved in partnerships, not in isolation. I believe the sponsors are hoping this competition will allow our youth to gain knowledge about the past so that as young people, you'll be able to make better decisions in the future and make our countries better places.
We know that we need to understand stories about people that look like us. So the fact that so many of you young people have registered was so encouraged by your enthusiasm and your passion for wanting to enter this debate. It is so important. It's just at the core of who we are, that we need to understand where we come from, understand our true history, and having a debate competition on this particular topic is such an important milestone. To have a real conversation about repair, and the fact that our young people were so articulate with their presentations, and to ensure that we keep educating our young people, because you are the future of us and are the Caribbean's a sustainable future. So congratulations, everybody.
We are looking forward to the debate. Encourage everyone to join the debate. Thank you so much, all.
Where is the justice for the 5 million enslaved Africans trafficked to the Caribbean? Think about it. Chattel slavery didn't just end, it left deep, painful scars across each Caribbean country. The deliberate underdevelopment, the brutal trauma and violence we inherited. It's time to repair this damage so we can build thriving, sustainable economies where young people like us can dream big, achieve more, and live better lives right here in our own home. Do you see why repair matters? Stand with us, join the calls for justice, and sign the petition for reparations at repaircampaign.org/petition.
It's very important that this is understood, because we can't talk about legacies before talking about what left those legacies on our landscape. enslaved Africans were subjected to the worst atrocities imaginable: kidnapping, storage in filthy barracoons, the Middle Passage, forced drowning as in the case of the slaver Zong, branding with hot iron, including by the church, with SPG being seared into the flesh of those they owned, unrelenting field and factory labor, legal codes that rendered them non-human, and harsh punishments when they resisted enslavement, deportation, dismemberment, hanging, imprisonment, severe flogging, including of women and children. According to Lucille Matherin Mayer, and I quote, "Neither age nor pregnancy exempted women from corporal punishment. Rather, they were laid down in the filthiest place the driver could find for floggings. Child labor was rampant, and women and girls faced sexual violence." Orlando Patterson wrote in his Sociology of Slavery the following: "The sexual exploitation of female slaves by white men was the most disgraceful aspect of Jamaican slave society." Unfortunately, the church was complicit in this crime against humanity. Initially, Christian planters did not think that the African was of theological significance. According to Elsa Gavaya, and I quote, "Early English slave law almost totally neglected the enslaved as a subject for religious instruction, as a member of a family, or as a member of society possessing some rights, as the same rights as everyone else."
Did you grow up on Anansi stories? Yep, most of us have. But did you know that Anansi played a major role in our ancestors' survival? So let's talk about it. He's more than just a trickster spider. He was a means of inspiration for resistance.
Anansi's cleverness in outsmarting his rivals mirrored tactics enslaved people used in their daily lives. By pretending to be foolish or inept, a technique known as play fool for catch wise, enslaved people lower their enslavers' expectations and reduce suspicion. These methods, inspired by Anansi, are known as Anansi tactics, or in Twi from Ghana, Anansi Sem. Anansi outwitted powerful animals and even white enslavers using cunning and wit. During the plantation era, Anansi tales were shared in enslaved quarters and sometimes in front of European enslavers. These stories, recorded in journals, reveal how enslaved people used public performances to mask hidden defiance. Plantation whites often missed the rebellious messages in these tales. Caribbean Anansi stories depict him evading punishment, tricking enslavers, and a whole plethora of adventures which highlight the resistance and survival through Anansi tactics.
400 years ago. 400 years ago, my people were dragged from their homes, tribes, families, placed on floating wood, and shipped across the Atlantic to what would be later described as the most inhumane act of all time. Cold, dark, uncomfortable, cannot describe the trip in ships where whips did not fail to miss. Injustice, rape and disgrace, blood rains, brute, force, ignorance, hate in their veins. Sweat and tears, labor revealed, produce from king fields only for the esteemed. 400 years of eroding one's pride, culture, heritage, value. 400 years of the iron chain, stringing up, leaving bare. Oh, but they never cared. Why fight when you would be met with sharp blades? So don't you dare cry out in fear. Why not plan escape with the plaiting of one's hair? Oh, the drums, listen, dance, communicate. For tonight we fight a battle not even death could spare. Blue eyes, white skin, master said that's beauty within. But guess what? Black, brown, gold, royalty, reparations we are owed. Them say hassa, but we say cassava. That's where we get the strength from to beat and conquer. For tonight we're returning to Ghana. You may say, I'm a descendant of slaves because of the rich melanin that gushes from my pores. But I came to tell you tonight, I am not a slave, rather the descendant of kings and queens. I am the embodiment of the divine. I do not chase, I align. I attract. What's meant for me already has my name on it. I am the personification of beauty, the expression of love, the creator of life, the acknowledgement of freedom. So go ahead, call me what you want, because when I die, bury me in the oceans where my ancestors jumped from the ships, because they knew death was better than bondage.
And here's what does need reparative justice. It is the seasoning period when we landed on the soil and they took away our names and our gods and our culture, and no slave system that we understand thus far has ever had that deculturalization process embedded in the process of our enslavement. So our enslavement was not just physical, it was not just culture, it was spiritual, because you took me away from everything. Who then must I look up to? Who then must I emulate? Who then must I kill myself in order to elevate you?
Listeners, to the conclusion and ultimately the results segment of our debate. To remind you, our debate looked at the question as to which of the two paths, the path being debt cancellation or monetary, commitments and payouts, which of those two paths are best for reparations? Yes. And of course, we had a most scintillating, and this is a sentiment from the panel of adjudicators, really, really excellent contest of this match. So much so that I'm pleased to announce that this is the highest scoring match in the competition thus far. We have one team ending with 290 points, that's out of 360, and the other team's 280 points. So both strong contenders. Now, listeners, viewers, what did we get from the debate? We got the idea from St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain, that the debt stock of Caribbean countries was essentially imposed upon them in pursuit of their own development, in as much as after colonialization and after the end of slavery and so forth, there was no infrastructure, no systems established with which to govern and propel the society forward. And there was no wealth at all available for Caribbean societies, Caribbean nations. And so that forced Caribbean countries to borrow to incur upon themselves huge amounts of debts that straddle them and that are to this day stymieing their development. We hear on the other side, as though, that it is better for us as Caribbean people seeking reparations to seek monetary payouts because we can use that monetary payouts to propel our development. So the question about which model, which approach best sustains and satisfies the demand for development was an intriguing one in this match. We heard from St. Joseph's College, St. Joseph's Convent, rather, that it is farcical. It's naive to think that to donate monies, to receive monies rather, will ultimately lead to equitable distribution within the Caribbean context and Caribbean societies. They point to the fact that Caribbean societies suffer from, sort of prejudice and classism, and that ultimately will lead to potentially the concentration of this wealth within the hands of the political and social elite, and that it is not likely to be distributed equitably. And the second speaker brought that very, very important idea, right? We get, on the other hand, though, some claims, not claims, but developed arguments that there are examples across the world where reparations have been given out, and ultimately the reparations has led to tangible developments of their societies. Barrackpore tells us that what can happen is that the wealth that is gained through the payouts can be used to build roads and hospitals and fix the social infrastructure that is so derelict within Caribbean societies. Interestingly, St. Joseph's tells us this important idea. They tell us that what it would amount if we were to go the way that Barrackpore would have us go, is a world where the monies that are gained would essentially be used for debt servicing. To which Barrackpore then further goes on to tell us that, well, it is not the case that the monies are owed to these former colonial states. because most of the money, and it's pointed to Jamaica, they pointed to Trinidad as examples, where the debt stock of these countries are largely owed or attributable to the multilateral organizations like the IMF and World Bank. Again, we get an important and an impactful response from St. Joseph Convent, Port of Spain. They tell us, well, who owns these entities? Yes, who are the majority shareholders and therefore the owners of the World Bank and IMF? And they point out, particularly in the latter part of their speech, that it is in fact owned largely by the colonial powers, the Europeans, and of course the Americans, and the Caribbean and African and Latin American countries own a minuscule, something just a little bit above 6% individual control is held by these states. And so clearly they contend that the monies are effectively still being borrowed from the colonial powers, and therefore the colonial powers have an obligation to pay out. Ladies and gentlemen, I could say a lot more about what was an exciting and a mind-expanding debate, but I will pause here for now to remind you of the scores. 290 points to 280 points. Yes, two high-scoring, high-performing teams. The winner of this match comes to us from Trinidad and Tobago. Oh, you may say, but both teams are from Trinidad. Well, the winner of this match is the team in side proposition, St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain. Congratulations to the proposition team, St. Joseph's Port of Spain. And ladies and gentlemen, the best debater in this match. And I want to pause just to highlight the fact that it was a close contest between the first speaker and the second speaker of St. Joseph's, but ultimately on a 2-1 split, the decision was made in favor of the first speaker from St. Joseph's Convent being deemed to be the best debater in this match. I
Congratulations.
thank. Go ahead.
Congratulations, Barrackpore West Secondary.
Your debate.
Congratulations to you too, and good luck in the future competition.
Thank you, same to you.
Thank you so very much. And so very charitable and congenial and warm, these two Trinidadian teams. I'm sure we'll see them in sometime in the future doing great things, hopefully debating still. So, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our day of debates. This has been the fourth match in the international reparations debate for 2020, debate competition rather, for 2025. It has been a pleasure bringing this contest to you, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow, where we engage in a slate of exciting matches to conclude round 2 of this competition. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.